The oil tests came back positive, and the HOA showed up the next morning. By noon, they said my inherited farm now required immediate oversight. I did not grow up on the farm. I inherited it quietly, with debt attached and very little guidance. The land sat at the edge of a planned community, separated by an old fence line and a dirt access road. For years, no one from the HOA had crossed that fence. No letters, no inspections, no interest. That changed the moment the survey trucks arrived. The first visual sign was the orange flags. Thin plastic markers appeared across the pasture, fluttering in the wind. A geologist walked slow lines, stopping to press instruments into the soil. The equipment hummed softly, steady and patient, like it had all the time in the world. I watched from the truck bed, boots on the tailgate, thinking only about numbers and repairs. Then a black SUV rolled up and stopped just short of the fence. A man stepped out holding a clipboard with a laminated badge clipped to his belt. Behind him, another vehicle arrived, then another. 3 people, clean shoes, no mud. They stood together, looking at the flags, the instruments, and then at me. The first action was small but deliberate. One of them tied a bright red tag to the fence post nearest the road. It flapped harder than the survey flags, placed there so it could be seen from far away. He said they were with the HOA. He said the activity on the land changed its status. He said they needed to document conditions. I did not argue. I opened the gate and let them walk the edge. They took photos. They measured distances with a laser tool, pointing it from fence to fence, fence to road. One crouched near an old board, lifting a warped board with a pen, peering inside without entering. Another filmed a slow sweep of the field on a phone held sideways. When they left, the red tag stayed.
2 days later, a white envelope arrived. Not taped to the door, not hand-delivered. It came through the mailbox like any other bill. The letter cited violations I had never heard of: unapproved industrial indicators, change in land use character, failure to notify the association of material activity. I read it twice, then walked the property. I kicked dirt where the flags stood. I opened the shed door fully this time, sunlight spilling inside. I drove the access road from end to end, noting where the asphalt turned to gravel, then dirt. There were no HOA signs, no gates, no markers claiming control. A week later, the next escalation arrived in motion, not paper. A notice board appeared near the entrance road. Someone had planted it overnight, 4 wooden posts sunk into the ground. On it was a laminated agenda announcing an emergency compliance meeting. The location listed was the community clubhouse. The subject line was clear: Inherited Farm Status Review. That afternoon, a truck I did not recognize parked across part of the access road, not blocking it completely, just enough to slow vehicles and force a wide turn. A man sat inside, engine running, watching. When the survey team arrived, they hesitated. One stepped out, looked at the truck, then at the notice board. They made the turn anyway, tires crunching loud against gravel. I stood near the fence, arms crossed, recording on my phone without pointing it at anyone. Just the road, just the vehicles passing, just the signs. At the meeting, I sat in the back. The room was half full. Chairs scraped, papers shuffled. A projector flickered as slides appeared showing photos of my land, taken from the same angles I had seen days earlier. The board spoke carefully. They did not say seize. They said protect. They did not say take control. They said temporary financial assurance. When they called for comments, no one looked at me. They voted quickly. Hands went up. The motion passed. Outside, night had settled over the parking lot. I stood by my truck, listening to engines start, watching taillights disappear. The next morning, my phone rang. The investor did not waste time. He said the lien filing appeared in a preliminary search. He said it changed everything. He said they were stepping back, quote, until clarity emerged. I stood in the field again, survey flags still waving, red tags still on the fence. The land had not changed, only the paperwork had. And if they moved this fast in public, what had they done quietly? By the time the lien hit public records, trucks stopped answering my calls, and the HOA started acting like the land already belonged to them. The first sign was movement on the property that I did not authorize. Not construction, observation. A white pickup parked at the edge of the access road just after sunrise. No logos, no equipment. 2 people sat inside for nearly an hour, windows down, watching the field. When I drove toward them, they pulled away without signaling. Later that day, the survey crew called to cancel, not postpone, cancel. I walked the property again, this time slower. I followed the fence line with my phone recording, narrating dates and times under my breath. Near the old shed, I noticed chalk marks on the ground, small circles, numbers. Someone had been measuring again. That evening, another envelope arrived, this one thicker. Inside was a notice of lien intent already converted to record. The date stamped on it matched the night of the emergency meeting. I did not call the HOA. I drove. The clubhouse parking lot was full when I arrived the next afternoon. Not for me, for them. Through the glass doors, I saw a folding table near the entrance, stacks of paper, a sign-in sheet, a camera tripod positioned at the back of the room, aimed at the board seats. I stood just outside the doors, watching people enter. Some paused at the table. Some walked straight past without signing. I counted quietly, matching faces to names as they spoke. Inside, the meeting moved fast again. A slide showed my property outlined in red. Another slide showed projected risk exposure. A third showed a timeline that skipped months entirely. Then came the action moment that told me everything. A board member reached for the gavel, raised it, then hesitated. She looked down the table. 2 seats were empty. She brought the gavel down anyway. That night, I re-watched my footage. I zoomed in on the sign-in table, on the empty chairs, on the moment the vote passed. I paused on the camera feed at the back of the room. It was recording, but the red light blinked irregularly, like it had been started late. If you're following this story because you want to see how quiet details undo loud authority, this is the moment to subscribe. These cases are never won by shouting. They're won by noticing what others assume no one is watching.
The next escalation came through physical presence, not mail. A metal stake appeared near the road with a laminated HOA notice zip-tied to it, restricted pending review. Not blocking access, just enough to imply control. When a delivery truck slowed and turned around, I filmed the whole thing from the fence line. No interaction, no confrontation, just evidence of deterrence. I began logging everything: dates, times, vehicles, meeting attendance inferred from video. I requested copies of all meeting minutes, voting records, and attendance logs through a certified records request. Not an accusation, not a threat, just a formal request under association bylaws. While waiting, I kept watching. Another meeting, another quick vote, another set of empty chairs. This time, I positioned myself where the camera at the back could not avoid me, not speaking, not interrupting, just present. Afterward, I walked past the board table as they packed up. I noticed something taped under the table edge, a printed agenda from an earlier draft, different vote language, different motion phrasing. I photographed it and left it exactly where it was. The records arrived a week later in a large envelope. Inside were meeting minutes that did not match what I had filmed, attendance lists showing names I never saw enter, vote counts that assumed full participation. I laid everything out on my kitchen table. Printed minutes, my video stills, timestamps lined up in neat rows. This was the trap, and it was already closed. They just did not know it yet. The HOA had moved fast to look decisive, but speed leaves marks. And now the question wasn't whether they overreached, it was how much of their authority collapsed once the timeline was forced into daylight. So when the next letter arrived, this one demanding immediate compliance, I didn't open it right away. I already knew what mattered. Would they notice their own paperwork turning against them before filing the next move?
The HOA doubled down in writing, but their own records were already splitting apart. All I had to do was let the timeline speak. I drove to the county records office early, before the counters filled. The building smelled like paper and toner, the kind of place where nothing dramatic ever seems to happen. I pulled a ticket, sat, and watched names flash on the screen. When my number was called, I did not ask about the HOA. I asked about the lien. The clerk turned the monitor slightly so I could see. The filing date, the meeting date cited as authorization, the signature block. I asked for a certified copy, then another, then the receipt showing the exact time it was entered. That afternoon, I returned to the farm. 2 survey flags were missing, not blown away, pulled clean out of the ground. I filmed the empty spots, then widened the shot to include the entire field. The fence, the access road, the HOA notice still zip-tied to the metal stake. A sedan slowed as it passed. The driver looked at the sign, then at me, then kept going. That evening, I received an email from the HOA's management company. It referenced continued non-compliance. It attached a revised fine schedule. It warned that further delays could solidify enforcement actions. I printed it and placed it next to the meeting minutes. The minutes claimed a quorum present. My footage showed otherwise. The attendance sheet listed names. My footage showed arrivals, exits, and absences. The vote time listed did not match the timestamp on the lien filing. The lien had been recorded before the vote concluded. This was not interpretation, it was sequence. The next visual action came unexpectedly. I returned to the clubhouse during business hours to submit a simple inquiry at the front desk. As I stood there, a staff member behind the counter slid a folder closed too quickly. A corner of paper stuck out. It was a draft agenda, the same motion language I had photographed under the table weeks earlier. I did not ask about it. I asked for a stamped receipt confirming delivery of my records request follow-up. She hesitated, then stamped it. The stamp hit the paper hard enough to leave an impression through multiple pages. Back in my truck, I lined the stamped receipt against the camera timestamp from the meeting video. Same date, different narratives. If you're still watching, this is where most people give up. They see paperwork and assume whoever prints more pages wins. Subscribe here if you want to see how calm documentation beats volume every time.
The HOA's next move was public. They sent a community-wide notice about protecting shared values. It included a photo of my property, taken from the road, framed carefully to suggest neglect. No flags visible, no equipment visible. I returned to the exact spot and recreated the angle with my phone. Same fence, same shed. This time, the flags and instruments were in frame. I saved both images side by side. At the next meeting, attendance was higher. Chairs filled, eyes followed me as I sat. The board chair spoke longer than usual. She referenced legal counsel. She referenced risk. Then she referenced the vote. I did not interrupt. When the meeting ended, I waited until the room emptied. Then I walked to the camera tripod at the back. The memory card slot was open, no card inside. I photographed it and left. The farm was silent when I returned. Flags still, no cars on the road. The lien was still active, the pressure was still real, but the story had changed hands. Would the HOA realize what they had triggered once someone outside their circle read the same timeline I did?
3 days after the insurer received the packet, the HOA stopped calling. That silence lasted exactly 48 hours. The first sign something had shifted was physical, not verbal. The metal stake with the laminated notice by the access road was gone. Not bent, not broken, pulled cleanly, leaving a narrow hole in the dirt. I filmed the spot from multiple angles, wide shot, close-up. Then I panned slowly to the fence line where the red tag had been tied weeks earlier. That was gone too. By noon, a new email arrived from the management company, shorter than the others. No threats, no deadlines. It said the board would be reviewing prior actions internally.
That same afternoon, a utility marking crew showed up without warning. Yellow paint traced lines across the ground near the survey flags. The men worked fast, heads down, as if they did not want to answer questions. I stood back and recorded. One worker paused, checked a tablet, then looked at the clubhouse road. Another snapped photos of the markings before they even dried. When they left, I walked the lines carefully. They marked infrastructure that did not belong to the HOA. County maintained, documented years before the association existed.
That night, I received a meeting notice, not an emergency session, a special reconsideration meeting. Different wording, different tone. If you're watching this unfold and wondering why no one is yelling, no one is threatening lawsuits, and no one is slamming doors, this is why. Power shifts quietly before it moves publicly. Subscribe if you want to see how that silence turns into leverage. At the meeting, the room felt different. The camera tripod was gone. So was the sign-in table. Attendance was taken verbally this time. Names read aloud. I counted again. This time, there was a quorum. The board chair opened with a prepared statement. She acknowledged procedural inconsistencies. She referenced timing issues. She did not mention the lien. Then came the visual action that confirmed everything. A board member slid a binder across the table toward the chair. Thick, tabbed, new. She flipped through it slowly, stopping at pages marked with yellow flags. Her jaw tightened slightly at one section. That section was my timeline. They had recreated it themselves. During public comment, I stood but did not speak long. I asked one question. Can you confirm the date the lien was authorized? The chair glanced down. She said they would address that after review. The vote followed. Motion to suspend enforcement pending audit. Seconded immediately. Passed unanimously. Outside, several residents approached me. Not hostile, curious. One asked when the farm became part of the HOA. Another asked why they never saw notices before. I did not answer directly. I told them everything I had was public record. 2 days later, the audit notice arrived, not from the HOA, from their insurer. It requested copies of all meeting recordings, sign-in sheets, and correspondence related to my property. It requested confirmation of quorum standards. It requested explanations for date discrepancies. I drove to the farm and walked the perimeter again. This time, no new signs appeared, no vehicles slowed, no chalk marks returned. The survey team called. They asked if access was clear. I filmed their arrival. The trucks passed the road without hesitation. Engines idled. Equipment came off trailers. One technician paused and nodded toward the fence. "Looks calmer," he said. I did not disagree. The next HOA letter arrived certified. Inside was a single page. The lien was being administratively withdrawn pending correction. No apology, no explanation. I placed it on the table next to the county-certified copies and filmed the comparison. Same dates, same signatures, different conclusions. At the next meeting, the board chair announced the lien withdrawal publicly. She framed it as a clarification. Someone asked about the emergency vote. She said it was no longer relevant. I raised my phone and recorded. The final visual action of the part happened without the HOA present. A county inspector arrived to review the utility markings. He walked the lines, checked maps, and confirmed jurisdiction allowed. County control, not HOA. He signed the inspection sheet, tore off the carbon copy, and handed it to me. I watched the paper curl slightly in the breeze as he drove away. Back at the farm, I stood where the red tag had once been tied. The fence post still bore a faint mark where the plastic had rubbed. Everything they used to move fast had been removed. Everything I used to move slow remained. The lien was gone, but the audit was still open, and the real question now was not whether the HOA would back down. It was what would happen when the insurer finished reading the same records they tried to rewrite. The lien was gone, but the audit had teeth.
And now the HOA had to explain itself to someone who did not answer to them. The insurer's audit did not arrive with cameras or confrontation. It arrived with requests. A courier dropped a thick envelope at the management office. I saw it happen because I was already there, parked across the street, camera resting on the dashboard. The driver waited for a signature. The manager hesitated before signing. That hesitation mattered. 2 days later, I received a copy of the same audit request through a public disclosure channel. It listed exactly what the insurer wanted reviewed: meeting notices, attendance verification methods, recording retention policies, authority to file liens. Nothing emotional, nothing accusatory, just scope. The HOA responded by calling another meeting, not emergency, not special, informational. The room was fuller than it had ever been. Residents stood along the walls. No slides this time, no red outlines of my property. Instead, the board chair held printed packets. She passed them down the table one by one. I filmed from my seat as each board member flipped through identical documents. Same tabs, same yellow highlights. My timeline again, now with insurer notes in the margins. One board member stopped reading halfway through and leaned back. Another rubbed his temples with both hands. This time, when attendance was called, the secretary stumbled. She read names slowly, paused, corrected herself. Someone from the back asked whether the lien withdrawal was permanent. The chair answered carefully. She said the lien was void ab initio, from the beginning. That phrase landed hard in the room. After the meeting, no one rushed to leave. Clusters formed, low voices, pointed glances toward the board table. Outside, a resident approached me. She said her neighbor had received fines under similar votes. Another said he never saw notices posted before meetings. I did not encourage them. I did not collect statements. I told them where to find the records.
The next action came at the farm. A county vehicle pulled up, not for inspection this time, but verification. 2 officials walked the access road, checking distances with a measuring wheel. They photographed the fence line and the utility markings. One asked whether the HOA had ever maintained the road. I said no. He nodded and made a note. They left behind a temporary marker indicating county jurisdiction confirmation pending final sign-off. Temporary, but visible. If you've stayed with this story, this is the moment most viewers underestimate. It is not the win. It is the point where power stops moving against you. Subscribe if you want to see what happens after momentum changes hands. The insurer's next request went wider. They asked for records from the previous 2 years, not just related to me, all emergency votes, all enforcement actions tied to quorum claims. The HOA hired outside counsel. That decision showed up physically. A law firm representative attended the next meeting. She sat slightly behind the board, notebook open, pen never stopping. When residents asked questions, the answers shortened. When someone referenced the audit, the chair deferred. At the farm, activity resumed. Survey drilling began in earnest. Small rigs moved slowly across the field. Mud splashed onto tires. Engines thumped steadily. I filmed from a distance, capturing wide shots of uninterrupted access. No signs, no stakes, no watchers. One afternoon, a letter arrived from the insurer directly. It stated that coverage for lien-related actions was being reassessed due to procedural exposure. No conclusion yet, just reassessment. That same day, the HOA sent out a community notice. It announced a pause on all enforcement actions pending review of governance procedures. Not just mine, all of them. The final visual action of the part came quietly. I attended a meeting where no votes were taken, no motions made, no enforcement discussed. The board chair read a prepared statement acknowledging systemic errors. She said the association would be revising its bylaws and training. Someone asked whether prior actions would be reversed. She said that depended on the audit's outcome.
When the meeting ended, I stayed seated as the room emptied. The board members left together, speaking in low tones. I walked up to the table after they were gone. The binder lay open, unattended. I did not touch it. I filmed it exactly as it sat. Outside, the night air felt different, quieter, not relieved, resolved. The farm was no longer under threat, but the story was no longer about my land alone. The audit was still active, the insurer was still reviewing, and the HOA was now operating under a pause it could not undo. So the question wasn't whether I had won, it was how many other decisions would collapse once the audit reached its conclusion.
The audit closed quietly, but its consequences did not. And the HOA had one last decision to make: accept the record or fight it. The insurer's determination arrived without warning. No meeting notice preceded it. No advance email softened the language. It came as a formal coverage letter addressed to the board, with copies sent to council, management, and me. I read it standing at the kitchen counter, envelope still open, camera recording from the side. The insurer concluded that the lien action was unauthorized from the start. The vote lacked quorum. Notice requirements were not met. The filing created exposure the policy would not defend. Coverage denied. That sentence changed everything.
Within 48 hours, the HOA called a special meeting. This time, the notice was posted correctly. This time, the agenda was specific: resolution of invalid enforcement actions. The room was full before the doors officially opened. People stood shoulder to shoulder along the walls. No projector, no slides. The board chair looked smaller behind the table. She opened with a statement acknowledging the insurer's findings. She confirmed the lien against my property was formally void. She confirmed all costs associated with its filing would be reimbursed. A check would be issued. She did not pause long enough for applause. There was none. Then came the motion. A board member moved to invalidate all emergency votes passed without verified quorum over the prior 18 months. Another seconded. Hands went up slowly, every one of them. The motion passed unanimously. That was the real ending. Not the check, not the apology that never came. The authority they tried to use against me collapsed under its own record-keeping. After the meeting, residents did not cluster around the board. They clustered around the sign-in table. People took photos of the attendance process, of the posted notices, of the agenda language. No one yelled, no one accused. They documented. At the farm, the final action unfolded over several days. The reimbursement check arrived by certified mail. I filmed the envelope, the check number, the amount. I did not celebrate. I deposited it and saved the receipt. The county issued final confirmation of jurisdiction over the access road. A metal marker was installed at the boundary, stamped with the county seal, permanent, visible. Survey drilling concluded without interruption. Equipment packed up. Flags were removed. When the field returned to stillness, it felt earned. The HOA sent one last notice to the community. It announced revised governance procedures, mandatory quorum verification, recording retention standards, external compliance audits moving forward. It did not mention my property by name. It did not need to. On my final visit to the clubhouse, I noticed something small. The camera tripod had returned. This time it faced the audience, not the board. I stood in the back and filmed it. No one objected. If you stayed until the end of this story, understand this clearly. Nothing here was won by force. Nothing was won by confrontation. Nothing was won by outshouting authority. It was won by sequence, by timestamps, by showing up when others assumed no one would notice. That is why these cases matter. They are not about farms or oil or liens. They're about what happens when process replaces power. If you want more real, monetization-safe HOA cases, where proof, not outrage, decides the outcome, subscribe now. Because the quiet wins are the ones most people never see coming. And once you know how they work, you stop being afraid of letters altogether.